Hey, you fanatical elves out there. How about those Cleveland Browns, those playoff bound Cleveland Browns? They're going to play in Cincinnati this Sunday. It is most definitely not a playoff atmosphere because the Browns have already clinched a playoff berth. The Cincinnati Bengals are playing for what? Pride. Because they don't want to go 0-6 against the division, and so they really don't have anything to play for. The fans, I think, want them to get a nice, big, fat, juicy draft pick. How exciting is that? So they kind of want them to not play hard so that they lose and they get, like, I don't know what, the number 12 draft pick instead of the number 18 pick or something. Uh, that's kind of a lousy motivation to play football, I think. You got to play to win, and certainly the players don't care about draft pick. That's dumb. So the players will be motivated to win. I don't know how motivated. It's got to be discouraging to play for quote unquote pride when you thought that you were going to be playing for a Super Bowl berth with one of the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL and Joe Burrow to lead you, and then he winds up getting hurt in preseason and then eventually succumbing to an entirely different injury later on. And although the Bengals have played pretty well on offense with their backup quarterback. I think that offense really hasn't been their problem. Nevertheless, it's hard to imagine, or I should say, hard to predict how the Bengals are going to respond. Now, in the case of the Browns, they've decided that, you know what, we've had a pretty long season. This 17-game season does make a difference. It's not the same as a 16-game season. I don't care what anybody says. 17 does not equal 16. I have worked it out on my calculator. 17 is more than 16. It is tougher, and it's not just by a little bit, it's a lot. And they have the opportunity to rest some of their superstar players, and they will take advantage of that. I believe that sitting Myles Garrett down on defense is going to make a major difference. Let me turn this music down. By the way, thank you, Free Sound Music, for providing the music for our show, as you do every week. It's really an awesome service, and we only pay by voluntary contribution, and I appreciate that so much. And thank you, fans, for making it possible with your support. But okay, so I believe that the Browns physically are going to be a different team by sitting down some of their key veterans, their stars on defense especially, and it's going to be a high-scoring game, I think. I don't feel that it's very predictable because of the difficulty in predicting how the Bengals will respond to this unique situation. And for that reason, I would stay away from it. But if you force me to make a prediction, I would say that Myles Garrett is worth about, in my opinion, he's worth about 5 or 6 points to the point spread and to the over-under. Most, I think, of the community believes that defensive players are only worth like 2 or 3 points. I think that's crazy. I think it's a lot more than that, and so I would predict a much more significant impact and therefore a pretty high-scoring game. And the Bengals should get into the 30s. I don't know what the Browns are going to do. And the Jeff Driskel experiment is fascinating. It's a lot like the Joe Flacco experiment, except Joe Flacco was a Super Bowl winning Pro Bowl quarterback, And Jeff Driskel is a guy that never really got a chance in the NFL. He's only played with really pretty poor teams, untalented teams like Detroit when they were Detroit. You know, they're a good team now, but a few years ago they were not very good. The Houston Texans, not very good. Denver Broncos when they were in a down period. The Cincinnati Bengals when they were early in their development with Marvin Lewis and they were not playing very well. Um, they had bad seasons under Marvin at first before they started to really improve themselves. And so I think that Mr. Driskel is actually a pretty reasonable starting quarterback. He's not a Hall of Famer, but I think he can run an offense and he can make all the plays that you would want from a quarterback. And if he had had more time with the playbook and more time with his teammates, he could be a rather formidable player. But under the circumstances, I'm kind of thinking, you know, it's going to be tough to avoid throwing interceptions and making mistakes. You know, I think there's going to be, you know, receivers that are going to cut to the left and he's going to throw to the right and stuff like that. And so I'm not really, I think it's going to be a sloppy game. That's what I think. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to share with you that will expound upon those points. And without further ado, I'd like to present that. Let me do my thing here. Share screen. And slideshow from beginning. Okay, there we go. So, this is what I've been saying really since October. And I published an article in Dog Pound Daily editorializing that the Browns should add another quarterback to the practice squad. I've been squawking about this since October. Jeff Driskel is one of the guys on my list. The other guy I liked was Garrett Gilbert, who was a former Brown in 2020, played under Kevin Stefanski. He was third string behind Baker Mayfield. And Case Keenum was the second string guy. And Driskel could have been signed in October, but wasn't. The Arizona Cardinals instead signed him. And the reason was that they traded Rocket Man Joshua Dobbs to Minnesota and created a vacancy, and Driskel filled it. So, you know, but I've been whining all season that the 17-game schedule really requires 3 quarterbacks on the active roster, and there's room on the practice squad for 1 or 2 others that could be trained up on the playbook just in case of an emergency, and that's exactly the situation that the Browns found themselves in this year. The Browns, in my opinion, were in denial when Deshaun Watson injured his arm. They should have known at that point that they needed to take out some insurance policies because Watson wasn't fully healthy. Simple as that. Until such time might arrive that he proved himself healthy and throwing without pain, which he never reached, they needed to have extra quarterbacks on the roster or at least on the practice squad. That was dumb. And especially in the COVID era, they jacked up the number of practice squad spots. I think it's up to 16 now. It used to be like 8. Now it's 16. There are roster spots available. Use them for the quarterback. That's the most important position. Use them. Okay, now I've been squawking about this. You may be skeptical and saying, well, what kind of crazy idea is this? You're not a football player. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, okay, maybe I don't. But, the other teams in the division are doing exactly what I'm recommending. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. they've got Kenny, they always get the three best quarterbacks they can find. They've been doing this for years. They have this year Kenny Pickett, and remember at the beginning of the year they thought Kenny Pickett was going to be the guy and that he was going to really take charge of that position. Now they are more skeptical about his real level of ability. But at the beginning of the year they thought he was the number one guy. Mitchell Trubisky was the number two guy. I still like him, by the way. Mason Rudolph was the number three guy. They were the three best quarterbacks that they could find under the circumstances. And they also have on the practice squad Trace McSorley, who's not a complete zero. He's a reasonably well-known guy that might have some potential as a backup quarterback. The Ravens, you remember the Ravens, that's the team that's in first place, that's locked up the number one seed. They have four quarterbacks. Four quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, the number one guy. People think that he's headed for the MVP award. Tyler Huntley, who's a very decent backup quarterback. Somehow he made it onto the Pro Bowl team as a backup, I guess he was. I don't think anybody believes that he's like the number two quarterback in the AFC, but he made it anyway. Josh Johnson, who's a veteran, who's pushing 40. Very good quarterback, but he just never got a chance to be a starter for whatever reason. And also the quarterback of the future, Malik Cunningham. All four quarterbacks on the Ravens are on the active 53-player roster. So there's no reason why the Browns can't do what the Steelers and the Ravens do. Now, the last place Cincinnati Bengals have Jake Browning as their number one guy in the absence of Joe Burrow, who's on IR. They have A.J. McCarron as their backup, and they have Drew Pitt as the third quarterback on the practice squad. So they, like the Browns, only have three quarterbacks that are under their control at the moment. So they have had three instead of four, but they at least have three. The Browns, for some part of the season, have had only two, which I think is nuts. But yeah, you need to have at least three and preferably four, because remember, the practice squad guys can be taken away by other teams in the NFL. All right, so Jeff Driskel only has 1 week of familiarity with the Browns playbook. That worked for Joe Flacco. Not everybody is Joe Flacco, but maybe can lightning strike twice. It's not completely crazy because Jeff Driskel knows Alex Van Pelt very well, and vice versa. Van Pelt was Jeff Driskel's quarterback coach when Driskel was the backup quarterback for the Bengals in 2018. So these two know each other very, very well. Also, the last stop for Driskel was Arizona this season, and his offensive coordinator was Drew Petzing. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he was on the Cleveland Browns staff in 2020 when Kevin Stefanski was the head coach for the Browns, and Stefanski and Petzing also worked together for the Minnesota Vikings from 2014 to 2018. So those guys have a long working relationship, and if Driskel knows the playbook for Petzing in Arizona, there are very similar plays to what the Browns run here in Cleveland. So they can pick out some plays that are similar enough that he can at least call the plays and run them here in Cleveland. So I think that can work out. Now, they do not have, or Driskel does not have, great familiarity with the Browns players. In fact, there's only one guy that I could identify that he's played with. That would be Jordan Akins, who was with Driscoll in Houston last season. There's probably some others that I haven't thought of, but only that one receiver that Driscoll has played with in the past. That's not very much. I like to skip now ahead to a social announcement, talk about the Amer I Can Foundation. This is part of the Cleveland Browns website for Be the Solution. This is something that the Browns have supported for social change. And this becomes important, especially when we have a crisis in America and people want to look to what the NFL is doing to help to support social change and to diffuse crises that may exist in our society. This program was started by the Browns family, the Jim Brown family, that is. And there's a picture of Jim Brown on the color photo on the upper right, and there's Jim and his wife Monique in the background. And I'm not sure who the others are. I think they're probably family members, but I really don't know. And then you can also see Jim is in the black and white photo on the lower left. Jim is in the center. I think this photo was taken in the 1980s. Now, he has been very active in the communities, both in Cleveland as well as in Los Angeles. And he's been trying to promote a better self-image and self-determination and the ability to start businesses in economically and socially depressed areas in those communities. So, from the website, socioeconomic problems are the great plague of our time. They cannot be separated from the decline of our civilization. This is all about taking self-responsibility for your own situation and realizing, that, perhaps all of us to some extent have been harmed by, the forces that oppress us or push us down, and that we need to have self-esteem in order to resist these negative self images that are pushed upon us by different forces in our society. Okay, so this again, quoting from the website, we believe that by enlarging the scope of individual lives, by introducing them to self-determination techniques, by motivating them with goals, by showing them how to improve and achieve success and financial stability, we will save lives that now seem to be lost. So this is really a crucial message that Jim Brown over and over again used to preach. Is he himself would be the first to tell you that he had his own problems that he dealt with, and you can dislike him for that if you want. But the point is that it's up to the individual to overcome these problems and not simply blame them on other people, but that each person needs to acquire the tools that they need in order to overcome them, and then become a functioning member of society and to own businesses and to allow these businesses to prosper and grow. And so that's really been that kind of self-help method that Jim Brown and his family have preached in, really all around the country, but especially in the places where they lived, in communities in Cleveland's east side and also in Los Angeles. So with that, I'd like to pause and once again thank the sponsors that we have for our shows in our various platforms that carry the Fanatical Elves Network shows. And thank you for the commercial sponsorship that have allowed us to bring these broadcasts to our audience. And thank you to everybody in the audience that subscribes and that listens to our podcasts. That really helps us a lot, and we're grateful for your support. Okay, Johnny Cleveland, you're up. Okay, I wanted to talk about what is a backup quarterback. What is realistic? What can you expect? I think in many fan bases, Cleveland included, we have unrealistic expectations for what a backup quarterback can do. We're not sending, Baltimore really did send two quarterbacks to the Pro Bowl, Lamar Jackson plus his backup, which is crazy. And I'm not sure that it was actually really truly deserved. But in any case, you're not going to get typically two Pro Bowlers. Uh, Being a Pro Bowl quarterback is not a prerequisite for being a backup. Charlie Batch, I think, is really kind of an ideal guy to be a backup quarterback. When he was with Detroit, he was kind of a 500 level quarterback. He was one of the criticisms that he had was that he was kind of too aggressive and used to get injured because he wouldn't slide when he should have, and he took some unnecessary hits and wound up missing games. So that's why he never had 16 starts for Detroit. And so his quarterback record as a starter was 5-7, 2 games under, 6-4, 2 games over, 8-7. But then the wheels fell off in 2001. He went 0-9 as a starter, and that was the end of his career. Must be your fault, Charlie Batch. We're getting rid of you, not signing you to a new contract. And so he wound up in Pittsburgh backing up Ben Roethlisberger, who, of course, never got injured and never missed a snap for several years. And so Charlie didn't have to do very much and only took 8 attempts in 2003, completed half of them. Didn't do anything in 2004. 2005, he finally got 2 starts and won both of them. And so you see this pattern going on for several years in Pittsburgh, from 2003 all the way to 2012. And he compiles a record of 6-3 in 9 starts. So in Detroit, he was a loser, 19-27 in Detroit, 6-3 in Pittsburgh. I think he was the same guy, but he played for a much better team in Pittsburgh, where he had Jerome Bettis and all those guys, and and Hines Ward, the greatest blocking wide receiver of all time. And in Detroit, he didn't have very much to work with, and he wound up being a big loser, and that was his reputation. But same guy, and yet he was a winner, and I think his last win in 2012 actually came against the Cleveland Browns when the team was still involved, the Pittsburgh team, that is, was still involved in the playoff race, and he came off the bench. I think he was maybe not even on the team. They activated him. Kind of like Joe Flacco, and he did his thing, could still play. And, so, these are not Hall of Fame numbers. You're not looking for a Hall of Famer in a backup quarterback. You just want somebody who will run the offense and get the W, keep the team competitive. And that's really all that you can ask for from a backup quarterback. And the Browns have some kind of crazy, had in the past, this crazy idea that the backup quarterback has got to be like the starting quarterback, somebody that emerges as a franchise dude, and you sign him when he's 22 years old, and if he doesn't develop into a franchise by age 24, you cut him. That's wrong. These guys don't get worse as they get older, as long as they're not injured, as long as they can still throw, as long as they can still run. They're going to be good players up until they're well into their 30s. It's not it's like cars. It's not the age of the car, it's the mileage. And these guys are low mileage, and they stay pretty good for a long time. Batch, people were afraid was getting beat up in his Detroit career. In fact, if you look at his sacks way over here on the right, he's getting sacked at like 10% of his plays. That's way too high. And then when he goes to Pittsburgh, now all of a sudden he gets dropped way down, and he's only at like 5% of his plays does he get sacked. And so that's a big difference. He was able to survive for a long time in Pittsburgh, whereas in Detroit he was getting killed. So um, that's what we're talking about for a backup quarterback. Somebody like Jeff Driskel is 30 years old, but he might still be a viable candidate to be the backup quarterback. He might be able to win football games. I think somebody like that should probably be invited to be part of the 90-man roster in summer training camp next year. Maybe he can win a job. I'd invite probably three more guys, have about six guys compete and see which of them are the best three and keep the best three, and the others might show up on a practice squad. Yeah, okay. And then let's make just some brief comments that some of these cliches that so and so could get you to the playoffs but not the Super Bowl. These statements don't make any sense. If you try to translate this into numbers, what you're saying is that you have absolute certainty that they're not going to win the Super Bowl, so that means you can bet against them and always, always, always win money. Well, there is no gambling that is that certain. If it was true, then you would always make money and you would be able to beat the odds makers. That's crazy. Then also, you need to have the franchise quarterback to win the Super Bowl. Well, I'll, is that Carson Wentz or is it Nick Foles? Which one is it that you need to have in order to win the Super Bowl? If you have a really good defense, you have a running game, you have everything else, you might not need the franchise quarterback. Tom Brady did not win the Super Bowl every year of his career. It only seemed like it. It's best to have the franchise quarterback. I'd rather have the franchise quarterback than the backup quarterback in the Super Bowl, but you still have a chance if you've got the best defense. In fact, the best defense might be the most important factor. But okay, Cleveland Browns with four different quarterbacks that won games are proof positive that you can make the playoffs at least without the franchise quarterback. And by the way, everybody that thinks that Brock Purdy is suddenly better than Patrick Mahomes is stark raving mad. That's just my personal opinion, but that's not true. Brock Purdy's team is better than Patrick Mahomes' team, at least on offense. But Brock Purdy is not better than Patrick Mahomes. I absolutely assure you that is not true. All right. So, this game is very hard to predict because we don't know how the Bengals are going to prepare for this, whether they're going to mail it in or whether they're going to actually show up. I would hesitate to handicap this game. Also, in the interest of full and complete disclosure, I am below break even for the season thanks to Alabama losing the Rose Bowl. I was sure that the SEC was better than the Big Ten this season. I did not believe that Michigan was going to win it. Also, I've been betting against the Baltimore defense all season long. The win against San Francisco was really a signature win as far as I'm concerned. So, betting against in NFL football is something that I do because I think it's kind of a professional responsibility. It kind of sharpens me to try to do the best job I can to be the oracle and predict things as best I can. But the fact of the matter is that this game is not set up on a level playing field. It's set up so that the odds makers, or rather the betting houses, will win because they get an extra 10%. And these games are so close that 10% is a lot. And they will beat you unless you're very, very good somehow. And I make it all the way to game 17 without losing money is pretty good, actually. And but the Baltimore defense is what did me in, and then finally the Rose Bowl um, brought me under profitability. After I started the season, like the first 6 weeks, I was making money. And I thought, hey, I must be really smart. Maybe I'll be the odds maker next year. But no, no. Overall, this season looks like I'm headed for a below profitability season. And I'm not sure that I feel strongly enough about the Browns Bengals game. I may place a bet on the over, and I'll have to think about that. I guess I'm leaning towards the over, and I probably would lean towards the Cincinnati team just because I believe that the loss of Myles Garrett is more significant than most of the betting community seems to believe. I believe that he's a 6 point player. I don't believe that most people believe in that kind of effect of a player on defense, but I believe that. So that's what I've got to say. We'll talk some more about football tomorrow. Have a great day, and once again, Happy New Year to all of you. Go Browns!